Playing with rockets is great when you're a kid. But when it's time to get a mortgage, you quickly realize that a rocket is complicated and expensive. It's best to work with an independent mortgage broker instead. They're dedicated to getting you a home loan faster and more affordably. And they're more than just mortgage experts. They live right in your own neighborhood, so you don't have to go it alone. For mortgages that are faster, easier, and more affordable, find a local independent mortgage broker near you.
Hello, I'm Jason Bates, owner of Electrum Financial, where a mortgage is not just a flip of the coin. So if you're looking to purchase or refinance in the state of Arizona, I certainly would love the opportunity to earn your business. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you're watching this on Roku or on Amazon, please write a review of the channel. We appreciate that support. Tell your friends and family if they're out there shopping for a home. Okay, so I want to jump into today's topic. Before I do that, though, I want to play a video that provoked this conversation or this idea in my head. So let's get right to the video and then we'll come back and talk about it here.
Problem with race. Rick says, okay, they want people to believe that race is, yes, it's in pretty much everything. Look at how the country was founded. Look at what's happening on the streets of American cities, and not just playing out in America. Look at what's happening with monuments and statues. Look at what's happening. Look at what the president's priorities.
Look what happens with pay.
With lending, with all sorts of things.
Housing, adoption.
All of it. And so to
Okay, did you catch that? Racism, housing, lending. What does it mean? How is racism a factor in housing? And I'm sure it's out there. We all can agree that racism is no bueno, not good. We don't like it. We want to eliminate it. But can we eliminate it? That's debatable. In my opinion, I don't think we can eliminate racism completely. I think it's really kind of ridiculous for us to think that we can do that. I will tell you that I believe, and I've been around the world when I was in the Marine Corps, went around the world, the United States is the least racist country in the world. That is, from my experience, I can't speak for everybody's experience, but in my experience, racism in the United States is at the lower end. I'm not going to say it's the best. It's certainly not the best, but it's at the lower end when you look at the other major developed countries. But I want to talk about mortgages. In mortgages, I believe there are some things that provoke racism, in my opinion. I want to share that here with you. So I want to bring up here, this is at the end of an application. So when you fill out an application, me as a loan officer, I have to ask you, and I'm obligated to ask you a certain set of questions. And those pertain to your ethnicity, your gender, and your race. Now, in my opinion, by me even having to ask you those questions is racism, provokes racism. I shouldn't say it is racism, but it certainly provokes racism, in my opinion. So let me zoom in here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the first thing I have to ask you about is your ethnicity. And in your ethnicity, I have to ask you if you're Hispanic or not Hispanic. Now, if you are Hispanic, then I have to ask you your ethnicity origin, which is either you're Mexican, Puerto Rican, or other. Now, I don't really get where that plays into whether you can repay a loan or not, or if you've got good credit, or if you have a steady job. I don't understand that. But I'll get into their reasoning once I show you the rest here of this, because it does get a bit more ridiculous in my opinion. Next thing I have to ask you is I have to ask you about your gender, male, female, pretty obvious. And then you have the choice if you're a male and a female, if you identify as both. And then the last thing under race here, to ask you if you're American Indian or Alaska Native, if you're Asian, Black or American, Hawaiian, white, information not provided. But if you are Asian, then I have to ask you what type of Asian you are. Are you Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, or other? Again, not sure why that matters. And in my opinion, kind of provokes a little racism, in my opinion, but I'll leave that for you to decide here. But if you decide not to answer those questions, because you do have the right to not answer those questions, it's for fair lending purposes to make sure that I'm not discriminating against anybody. But if you decide not to answer those questions, then if I'm taking the application with you if I'm looking or we're in person and we're taking an application together, then I have an obligation to visually make an assessment of what you are. So I have to ask you, or I have to visually look at you and tell what your ethnicity is, or I have to visually look at you and tell what your sex is, or I have to visually look at you and determine what kind of race or what race you are. Now, in my opinion, that is racism. Yet we're obligated to do that. Now, with this, I think they should get rid of this thing completely. This whole thing. Just get rid of it. 100%. See ya. This doesn't even belong in an application, in my opinion. Now, the reason they ask for this is because there have been studies done where people of minority descent call in, ask for an application, or ask to get pre-qualified for a loan, or they email a company, and the company isn't as quick to respond to somebody who has maybe an Asian name or a traditionally black name versus a white name. And so that disparity, or that turn time, if you will, for some ethnicity or race groups isn't as good as white, and therefore they want to know that. But then again, if somebody doesn't return an email for a day with somebody with an Asian name versus a white person in a day, what are you going to do about it? At the end of the day, you as a consumer, you have total control. They don't respond to you, go somewhere else. You can go somewhere else. Now, there are other charges out there where there have been studies in the past. Now, there are new laws since Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act, but there have been charges where the Asian community gets charged more, or the Hispanic community gets charged more. And I will say in the Hispanic community, I've seen a lot of Hispanic loan officers charge more to Hispanic borrowers than they do to other people. So I have seen that, but not so much today. Don't see it today with the new laws and the way things are done. It's virtually impossible to do that. So I really wish that they would just get off this whole subject. It's awkward for loan officers to have to ask this, and then for the government to ask the loan officer to make a visual observation of somebody, in my opinion, is just a bit odd to me. I just don't think. I'd like to know your thoughts, though, on it. So please write your comments below. Do you think racism plays a big role in mortgage lending or in housing, or is it something that is really not that big of a deal? So I'd like to hear from you. So please write your comments below. Email me, text me, reach out on this video. Love to hear comments, but that was my 2 cents.